I'm Anna,
I'm Jessica.
and this is the Paranoia Pair. There was a lady, and she was like giving people advice about the rapture, and she's like, avoid being on the toilet because I guess they like actually thought that you would like physically ascend. It's just you and you're just floating into the sky.
That makes me think
She's like, don't look down. Try to avoid being on the toilet. I'm just like, oh my god.
that makes me think of that South Park thing where the guy's on the toilet and he's spinning because the turd's so big. And then you get stuck up in the afterlife exactly how you were, and like so you're just stuck up there, like sat toilet, like no pants on, pants around your ankles for the rest
Mhm.
of eternity.
Oh, that'd suck. I was gonna make a joke and be like, guys, sorry for the no episode last week.
We
We
got
got we
raptured.
got raptured, but they realized after a couple days that there was a mistake and they sent us back.
They were like wrong list.
Okay. I've never heard of this case. Well, I also was going I did this and I was like, "Oh, they just solved the yogurt shop murders." And it's been like a cold case for like literally 20 years. And I was like, "Oh my god, this research is hard." So I'm still working on it. So maybe it'll be ready by next week. I'm actually doing the Pike County Murders, and this took place in Ohio. I feel like Ohio is like actually the new Florida.
The Florida of the North.
In the quiet hills of Pike County, Ohio, their community was shattered in April of 2016 when one of the most shocking mass murders in the entire state unfolded. 8 members of the Roden family were brutally executed in the middle of the night across 4 different homes.
Okay.
On April 22nd, 2016, Bobby Joe Manley came over to Chris Roden Sr.'s home to feed his chickens and other animals around 7:50 in the morning. And Bobby Joe is the sister to Chris Sr.'s ex-wife, Dana. Um, and this isn't like something out of the norm. Like she would always come over and help him out. And they were still pretty close. The door was unlocked, which was unusual. So she went inside the trailer and called 911. She tells the operators that she thinks that her brother-in-law is dead because there's blood all over the house. She says that she saw 40-year-old Chris Roden Sr. and his cousin, 38-year-old Gary Roden, in the house. She thought they were both dead and it looked like someone beat the shit out of them. The 911 operator told her to stay outside, and obviously not wanting to see the body, she agreed. She's really distraught over what she's seen, and so she makes her way to the property next door that also belongs to the family. It's like a big plot of land that they basically split. So one generation lives on this plot over here, and the other one lives over here.
The dream.
Yes. The property next door is where Chris Sr.'s son Frankie lives, and so she goes over there to check on him to see if he's okay. And Frankie is 20 years old, and his fiance, 20-year-old Hannah Gilly, was staying with him. When she knocked on the door, Frankie's 3-year-old son answered. Bobby asked him where his dad was, and the little boy said that his dad was playing zombie in the bedroom. And so she rushed in to check, and she found both Frankie and Hannah dead, and their 6-month-old was laying between them, covered in their blood. But luckily it was still alive. Police cars and ambulances lined the street along with news trucks and packed parking lots. And they were all reporting on this like as it was happening. And the county sheriff was in charge of the investigation, and he called the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation for help. I'm going to refer to them as the BCI just because I don't feel like saying all that.
It's a lot of words.
It's a lot of words. Bobby Joe's brother, James Manley, went to check on their 37-year-old sister, Dana Roden. He discovered the third crime scene. She was found dead in her bedroom. And Dana's son, Chris Jr., who was only 16, was found dead in his bedroom as well. Dana had a 19-year-old daughter, Hannah, who was also found dead in her bedroom. And she had her 4-day-old daughter laying beside her. Her 4-day-old daughter was lying next to her covered in blood, but was still alive. Hannah had another daughter who was 2 years old. Luckily, was not at the residence at the time of the murders. She was with her dad, who had shared custody. Where 1 week she would spend with her father, Jake, and 1 week she would be with Hannah, her mother. A news helicopter was flying over Dana Roden's house when they spotted police wearing hazmat suits entering the home. 44-year-old Kenneth Roden's home was the fourth and final crime scene. He was found dead in his bed with dollar bills laying all over his body, which I thought was weird. And he is brothers with Chris Roden Sr., and he would be the eighth victim. Investigators were horrified, obviously, and these were like brutal. And the fact that it was spread across 4 homes, the 4-day-old and the 6-month-old were placed under protective services because they were scared that something might also happen to them. And the 3-year-old was put under the guardianship of his mother, who was not involved in the shootings. They cleared her pretty quickly. Investigators briefly considered the possibility of a murder-suicide, but it was quickly ruled out since none of the deaths appeared to be suicides. Immediately, theories and speculation began to spread like wildfire. Like, how the hell could 8 people be killed the same night without anybody noticing? They thought maybe this could have been the work of a drug cartel or maybe somebody with a personal vendetta. On April 28th, Gary Roden was the first victim to be buried, and his funeral was held in South Shore, Kentucky. And then Hannah Hazel Gilley, Frankie Roden's fiance, was buried on May 1st. And then the funerals for the remaining victims took place on May 3rd, and they had high security there. Despite the injuries they had, though, they had an open casket funeral, which I could not imagine.
I mean, I guess if they weren't shot in the face.
I'll get into it.
Okay.
So the Ohio Attorney General, Mike DeWine, approved more than $20,000 to help pay for the funerals.
Wait, can I just say how weird it is though that like we show off our dead bodies like this?
Yeah.
Like I understand like when my mom died, being her daughter, like I appreciated seeing her one last time.
Mhm.
Why are we showing off dead bodies to
Yeah.
extended family and like friends and coworkers and
Well, and especially when they're murdered brutally.
yeah, it's kind of a weird concept.
Yeah, I feel like we also just like as human beings have like the some sort of fascination with death.
We do, but like I don't know, it's just weird to let strangers and like people who weren't that close cuz anybody can go to a funeral.
Yeah.
And especially ones like that, like I feel like probably like a lot of just strangers from the area
Mhm.
wanted to go to like quote unquote show support.
I feel like for funerals like you should show like proof of like you had an invitation.
Yes. Yes, an invitation. Like
And then there's just there's a bouncer at the door stamping everybody's hands.
I was thinking of that one video where there's like they're in this building and this like I think it was like a girl. She was like harnessed in on this like zip line thing,
Mhm.
but her body was completely limp as she was going, like she passed out or something. And
Mhm.
someone said that this is how they want to be displayed at their funeral.
Oh god.
Like me personally, I would love that. But I think it's messed up that everyone else wants to look at dead bodies.
The father of Hannah Roden's 2-year-old daughter, Jake, attended the funeral. Family members were really worried that something might end up happening to him and the rest of his family as well. And he's part of the Wagner family. They're a rich family, and his grandparents own like a horse ranching company.
If you have the last name Wagner, you should come from a family that owns horses.
Yeah.
That seems very fitting.
So they're kind of like, they're really well known. The Wagners and the Rodens were also like really, really close. Jake Wagner's dad, Billy, was close friends with Chris Sr., and Jake's brother, George, was best friends with Frankie. And so it was like basically natural that Jake and Hannah would like end up getting together. Jake and Hannah had planned on getting married, and they even had tattooed wedding rings that they were
Aw.
wanting to get. The family was instructed by law enforcement to be cautious as they might be the next target. People were sleeping with guns next to them at night, and the community was like in a panic because, like, oh my God, this happened in our small town. Like, who else could be next? So people who have never owned guns before were also buying their very first gun. The Rodens were beloved in their community. They were constantly giving to those who needed it and helped in any way they could. If they had anything extra, they were giving it away to someone who needed it. 2 days after the murder, tips were pouring in. About 30 people were interviewed, but there was still no signs of an official motive. So, when searching the crime scenes, BCI didn't find any weapons, but they did find shell casings that belonged to a 22 caliber long rifle in Frankie Roden's home. They also found a 30 caliber SKS rifle round and a single 40 caliber round in Chris Sr.'s home. They also noticed bullet holes on the outside of Chris Sr.'s home, and inside were two bloody shoe prints that were different sizes and coincidentally happened to be both of a left foot. So obviously there's two people at least.
Or someone was smart and
They
got
wore
two
two
left
left
shoes
shoes.
in different sizes to throw off the police.
That'd be so uncomfortable.
Oh,
Um, that along with different caliber sizes pointed them to believe that at least two people were involved. The lab had found that the shoe sizes were a 10.5 and an 11, and one of the shoes had very little wear on them. So it was likely they were brand new. They went to different stores in the area looking at the shoes available and the design of the tread because that's pretty unique. The scientists found shoes that matched the tread pattern at Walmart, and those shoes exclusively were only sold at Walmart. So they still had no eyewitnesses, though, no DNA, no fingerprints. They had nothing to point to anyone in particular. During the walkthroughs of the properties, they discovered that there had been 3 marijuana growing operations. One was in a small shed by Kenneth Rhodes' home. Another one was in a big barn at Chris Sr.'s home, and he also had another one in his attic. So there was an estimated total of 200 cannabis plants that were recovered from the crime scenes. I can't visualize that. I'm just guessing it's a lot.
I can because one time I worked with this old guy who
Mhm.
grew weed in his barn across the street in the attic, and the whole thing was just full of marijuana plants. And I was like, that's so cool that an old guy does this. Anyway,
Did he tell you it was 200?
no.
Oh,
I
that's
just
funny.
imagine it looked
You
like
should
that.
call him and ask him how many.
I feel like he's dead probably.
Dang.
No, I don't know how many that is because I can't keep a singular plant alive.
So this fueled rumors that the drug cartel could possibly be involved, and it wasn't too far-fetched for investigators to believe because US 23 runs through the southern part of Ohio and Pike County, and it's also nicknamed the Heroin Highway. I didn't know we had that in Ohio. Did you?
I mean, I didn't know we had a heroin highway,
I
but
didn't either.
I know we have a lot of drugs.
Yeah,
Like,
lots of meth.
yeah, that's where I was gonna. I thought we were uppers.
Yeah, like meth and opioids.
Yeah, I thought this state was an upper, not a downer.
And fentanyl. Okay. This highway is known for people trafficking meth, fentanyl, cocaine, heroin, and sometimes prescription medications. And they actually had located a Mexican national marijuana growing operation a few miles from the Roden family's home. So it's not too far fetched. They really were set on this theory though. But 3 months later, the police still didn't name anyone of interest and they still didn't have a motive. But they also found evidence of equipment commonly used to breed chickens for cockfighting. Dana Rudin's dad, Leonard Manley, believed that the family knew whoever did this. He pointed out that Dana had two very protective dogs, and strangely, they didn't seem to react or try to stop them during the shootings. Investigators also said that there were no signs of forced entry at any of the homes, which adds to the idea that the killer or killers were familiar with the family. The police did, however, uncover that Billy Wagner and Chris Sr. both got into the business of selling marijuana together. So, after learning this information, BCI picked Billy Wagner up for questioning as he was leaving a local Kroger. Billy tells them that they were looking at the wrong people and that the family was involved with the murders. He was also kind of rambling, so the officers just kind of let him talk, hoping that he would reveal anything that would help them with their investigation. Billy said that Chris Sr. was expecting a commercial shipment of weed and was hoping to sell to the entire county, which would make him a threat to other people in that business in the area. But Billy denies being in business with Chris Sr., and he says that he would just haul a lot of cars for him. The shipment was proven to be true, but despite what Billy said in the interview, investigators found out that Chris Sr. and Billy were in an $800,000 marijuana drug deal.
You think 200 plants is a lot.
I can't imagine having that much money.
Did we even have name brand weed back then?
I can't imagine having more than $1,000.
No.
And Billy would take trips with Charles to haul marijuana. So in 2017, the Wagner family sold their plot of land and they were planning to leave Ohio. They ended up moving to Kenai, Alaska, which
Lots of drugs there.
is there?
Alaska's got a lot of drug use and serial killers.
The only thing I know, well, Kenai reminds me of, I'm pretty sure it was the name of that one of the brothers from Brother Bear.
Kita? Kita?
Is it Kita? I thought it was Kenai.
It probably
Anyway,
is. Yeah, Kenai?
is it Kenai?
Kenai? Kenai? Coda and Denai?
I really liked that movie. I was obsessed with it.
Heartbreaking though. Why did they all have to hurt so bad?
I know. My favorite part, like the one that like sticks with me the most, is that one old bear, and she keeps talking about how her husband's dead, and you just hear her husband yelling in the background, "Quit telling everybody I'm dead!" And she goes, "Sometimes I swear I can still hear his voice."
I just don't understand why every kid movie when we were younger had dead parents. No parents survived.
Someone was dead or actively dying.
Yeah, either they already died or you're gonna get a dramatic scene about them dying in the next like 7 minutes. That's gonna crush you.
Okay. Oh, we've gotten off track. Okay, so like most places in Alaska, it was rural, off grid, and it wasn't very populated. And they actually had talked about wanting to move to Alaska for years. So it wasn't very surprising when they decided that they were moving. So after they moved to Alaska, Billy Wagner's father had passed away, and so did his wife Angela's. But neither of them returned to Ohio for their funerals. So obviously they're like, this is fucking suspicious, right? So they went to the Wagner's old home, and the new owners gave them the green light to search the property. They also had search warrants, but the homeowners was yeah, you can look around. So they searched the property for their investigation after they obtained a search warrant. It seemed like they had left a ton of stuff behind because in the documentary they said they had to go through a lot of things and it took multiple days. So I'm wondering how much shit they just left behind. Um I think the new owner of the property though was like a relative. So they ended up finding a receipt from Walmart where they had bought two pairs of shoes. You want to guess the sizes?
3 and 4.
At 10 and a half and 11.
Oh, shit, that was my next guess.
Close. And the date of purchase was right before the murders. Police contacted Walmart and got video evidence of Angela Wagner purchasing the shoes at the store. Shell casings were also found at the scene of the crimes where the bodies were found, and they matched shell casings that were found in the driveway of the Wagners. And the casings at the Wagners had been used for supposedly target practice. And I don't know if you know this, but like the gun barrels and the firing pins leave like indentations or like marks on the casing, and you know exactly like which gun that came from. You know what I mean?
Nope.
They're like fingerprints.
Okay.
Like a gun fingerprint.
Okay.
So the gun in question was used to kill Chris Jr., Hannah, and Dana. In the search, they also find a laptop. And on the laptop were passwords to Hannah's social media that they used to hack into her Facebook. So they hacked into her Facebook and they were taking screenshots of her conversations. One of them said that she would not be signing any custody papers and that the Wagners would have to kill her first before she signed them. Okay, so the Wagners decided to come back in May of 2017, not to pay respect to either of their fathers, but for some of the items they left behind in the move. BCI stops them at the border of Montana, and they interviewed Jake and George. They both denied being involved with the murders. Billy refused to cooperate, but Angela did agree. She said in her interview that her and Hannah Roden were very close, and she called her mom. When asked, she said that she didn't know why anyone would suggest that the Wagner family would be involved with the Roden family murders. When asked if she bought socks or shoes for Jake, George, or any of the members in her family, she said no, she didn't buy shoes for anybody. And they tell her that they have a receipt and footage of her buying shoes. She admits she did buy them, but that the people she bought the shoes for threw them away because they were old man shoes and they didn't want to wear them. I don't know why you throw them away and you just want to return them.
Literally.
But I also do hate returning things, so I guess I understand. I just would have donated them, to be honest.
Yeah.
Police told her they don't believe what she's saying, and she immediately says that she's gonna stop talking and get an attorney. Their car was bugged during the stop, though, while they were interviewing everybody, but unfortunately, because of the noise from the road, it like drowned out everything. So it was just basically like a bunch of background noise.
I was just imagining, like, they bugged the wrong person, and, like, you just hear, like, one of the people who are, like, listening in the conversation, and, like, he's just, like, over there, like, breathing heavy and farting and stuff, and, like,
Mhm.
that's they got, like, 6 hours of just that.
Around the same time, police were asking the public for more information about the Wagners, whether it was personal stuff, business related, or just everyday interactions, including cars they drive, any firearms or ammo they might have, or anything else that might help. It was revealed that Angela Wagner was the kind of mom who made her kids her whole world, but like not in like the loving mother kind of way, but like controlling obsession, like borderline, like emotionally incest kind of way.
Yeah.
Um,
Typical boy mom thing.
yeah, she was very overprotective. She basically did a background check on you to see if you were who she wanted her kids to be friends with. And if she didn't like you or what she found, you weren't allowed to be friends with her kids. Also revealed that when Jake and Hannah started dating, he was very physical and always in her face, telling her what she could and couldn't do. And he really tried to contain her because she was super outgoing and wanted to go out and loved doing things. Also, he was 20 and she was, I think, 15 when
No.
they got together. So not only was he super controlling and abusive, but a pedophile. When Hannah got pregnant, Angela really wanted to be involved with the baby. She
Of course she
didn't
did.
want to be a grandma who spoils the baby and then sends her back home. She wanted to be in control, basically. Hannah didn't like how controlling she was, and of course, Jake sided with his mother. And Hannah wanted to continue going to school and working, and Jake didn't like that. He wanted her to stay at home and take the role that his mother did. Hannah's mother, Dana, was very concerned for her daughter because when Jake didn't get what he wanted, he would act out and get violent. And at one point, Jake had put his arm on her throat and held her against a wall and tried to choke her. And after that, she decided to leave him. Thank
Good.
God. She also took their 2 year old and went to live back home with her mom. Jake wasn't happy about this and he wanted full custody. The Wagners went and talked to an attorney about fighting for full custody, but they were told that Ohio courts favor the mother, so it wouldn't be easy for them to win.
Wait, so okay. So she was 15 when they got together,
Mm-hmm.
and she was 19 when she was murdered, and their child was 2, which means a grown man got a 17-year-old girl pregnant.
Yeah.
That's gross.
Yep. So after the breakup, Hannah started dating Charlie Gilly and she got pregnant, but they broke up. She decided to keep the baby and gave birth in April, a few days before she was murdered. So in March of 2018, after living in Alaska for a year, the Wagner family leave because it's too expensive and they couldn't afford it anymore. I don't blame them because everything's so fucking expensive in Alaska. I feel like if you go to Alaska, you really either have to have lots of money or have like really good off-grid survival instincts. I have neither of those. The only choice they had was to move back to Ohio. In April, once they moved back, Jake and George got jobs with a trucking company. That trucking company cooperated with BCI and allowed them to wire a truck. They also wiretapped their homes, cars, and phones. So on May 31st, 2018, in one of the wiretaps, Angela is heard telling Jake that he made 90% of their plan and that she followed his decisions and he can't make her out to be the bad guy. On June 9th, 2018, the wiretap picks up a conversation between Angela and Jake. Angela is heard saying that they are on borrowed time and they're also running out of it. So they need to figure something out. Jake says that he knows the cops are listening. He knows they have the truck bugged and they probably also have the house bugged too.
So let's keep talking.
Yeah, let's keep talking about this murder we committed. Jake tells his mom that she's paranoid, and Angela tells him that if they get framed, she's not going to sit in prison. Jake tells her that they won't keep him in prison forever, and Angela yells at him to stop talking about that kind of stuff on the phone.
They're having this conversation on the phone?
The phone that they suspect is bugged. Crazy. On June 13th, Angela tells George that if he's arrested, not to sign anything and not to say anything. George says he doesn't think he's the person they're going to arrest. Everything the cops have They're trying to point to Jake, so he thinks he will likely be arrested, not him. In September of 2018, journalists are allowed to review the autopsy results, investigative notes, and findings along with photographs. And the extent of the Roden family's injuries are revealed to the public. All 8 victims were shot with the gun barrel either touching their skin or just centimeters away because there's burns that were on some of the bodies from like the heat of the gun. Chris Roden Sr. was shot 9 times in the face, torso, and limbs. Gary Roden was shot 3 times in the head. Frankie also 3 times in the head. Hannah Gilly was shot 5 times in the head. Dana Roden was shot 5 times in the head. Chris Jr. was shot 4 times in the head. Hannah Roden was shot 2 times in the head. And Kenneth was shot 1 time in the eye.
How good was this mortician?
I don't know. That's why when I seen this and went, oh my God, they had an open casket funeral for these people.
Like, that mortician has to have magic hands. That's crazy.
And there was bruising that was also found on some of the bodies, indicating that some of the victims were also beaten. On November 2018, arrests were finally made. Billy was arrested in Fayette County, Kentucky. George and Jake were arrested during a traffic stop in Ross County, Ohio. And Angela was arrested in Scioto County, Ohio at her home. And when Angela was arrested and put in the back of the police car, she asked if she could have her boots because her feet were cold. And she was told no.
Good.
And when she was told no, she squinted her eyes and glared at the cop and said, I'll remember that.
Okay.
So George Billy Wagner III, Angela Wagner, George Wagner IV, and Jake's real name is Edward, were charged with multiple counts of aggravated murder. Rita Newcomb, who is Angela Wagner's mother, and Frederica Wagner, who is Billy Wagner's mother, were also charged with obstructing justice and perjury. So Billy, Jake, Angela, and Rita were charged with forging custody documents, and it was announced that they would seek the death penalty for all 4 family members charged with murder, which I think is kind of crazy, like, because so many states have gotten rid of that, and how recent this was.
So the kid, so this was all about getting custody of his kid, the 2-year-old?
Yeah. So the news of the Wagner's arrest shocked the community. They were questioning whether they were responsible because of how close they were with each other and what possibly could have happened to them for them to want to murder the whole family. Even the Wagner's own family couldn't believe it, but they trusted law enforcement would figure out who was really responsible. The motive behind the killings is believed to be a custody dispute over the young 2-year-old child. Jake Wagner, who was 26 at the time, had a daughter with Hannah Roden, who was 19 at the time of the murder. He should not have been with a 15-year-old when he was.
Because he would have been 24 and she would have been 17 when they had the baby.
Yeah. Some people found it hard to believe. Authorities say Billy, Angela, George, and Jake Wagner came up with a detailed plan to murder the Roden family, and according to Governor Mike DeWine, they had spent time learning the Rodens' daily routines and even know the ins and outs of their homes, obviously because they're so fucking close with each other. Investigators say the Wagner family went all out prepping for the murders. They recently bought ammo, a magazine clip, brass catchers. I'm assuming it's like the thing you put on the gun and it catches the shells after, and even a bug detector. They also bought a cell phone jammer. They looked into ways to get around security setups, like figuring out how pets might react, messing with phones, cameras, and disabling parts of a home security system. Officials also believe they built a homemade silencer that was actually used during the shootings. The police had very limited physical evidence to convict them for the crime, though, so they had to build the case. In March of 2021, the fucking sheriff of Pike County, who was in charge of this investigation, was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Turns out he was stealing drug money to fund a gambling habit, and investigators found that he had lost thousands at casinos in Scioto County. And he also rigged auctions for seized vehicles. He once used a middleman to buy a Nissan Versa for $2,000, and then he turned around and sold it for $5,000.
Hell yeah.
He pled guilty to 2 counts of theft in office, and when the property value or services stolen was between $1,000 to $7,500. Two felony counts of tampering with evidence, and the evidence included bags of cash in amounts of $7,000 and $621, and one misdemeanor of conflict of interest for the Nissan. In May of 2023, he was granted early release by the Ohio Parole Board, and he was then sent to like a halfway house or like a treatment center or something before he was able to be like fully and released in the public. On April 22nd, 2021, exactly 5 years after the murders, Jake Wagner stood in court. He took a plea deal that spared him and his family the death penalty. In exchange, he had to plead guilty to all charges, which included statutory rape. He also had to testify against his own family members, provide full details of the planning and execution, and accept life in prison without parole. Jake admitted to personally killing 5 of the 8 victims. He also confirmed that the murders were meticulously planned with his family. The motive was custody of his daughter that he shared with Hannah Roden. Jake claimed that the Roden family wouldn't let him have full control, and the Wagners believed violence was the only solution. The guns used to kill the Rodens were placed in buckets of concrete and were gifted to a family member of the Wagners on Father's Day as boat anchors.
Happy Father's Day. Wow, buckets of cement.
Yeah.
This is really what I wanted.
That family member had no idea what was inside of his buckets.
I'd be so pissed.
The anchors would later be cut from a rope on the boat and dropped into a pond. I guess that's just how you get rid of anchors. You just keep buying them. Maybe that's why they
So
were just
not
buckets
only
full of
did he get
concrete.
a shitty Father's Day gift, but then they cut it.
Yeah, they're just like, we don't need this anchor anymore, and they just cut the rope. Jake Wagner confessed to the state that the concrete anchors were at the bottom of a pond, and they used a search warrant. The state found the blocks in the water, chipped away at the concrete, and found the murder weapons inside. And the weapons matched the shell casing markings. Jake Wagner said that at first he didn't agree with his parents when they brought up the idea of killing Hannah, but over time he gave in. Eventually, they decided to target 4 of her family members because they believed the little girl was growing up around people they thought were dangerous. Everyone else that was killed that night was, quote, collateral damage. The Wagners spent 3 months planning the murders, buying masks, ammunition, and a device to jam phone signals. Jake and George even dyed their hair the week leading up to the killings. He also was obsessed with Norman, the guy who plays in the Walking Dead series.
Oh, no.
What's his name in The Walking Dead?
Um,
He's that guy with the crossbow. He wears like black leather.
Hang on.
Doesn't he ride a motorcycle?
Trying to remember.
Is his name Charlie?
No, I was gonna say Keanu Reeves. It's not right either.
Keanu Reeves.
Guy from Walking Dead.
His name's Norman.
It
Is
starts
his
with
name
a
Norman?
D. It starts with a D.
Oh, Dale. Darren.
Darren.
He was obsessed with that guy, had like pictures of him on his phone and everything. So Jake Wagner was sentenced to life in prison with the chance of parole after 32 years. The judge decided to throw out an earlier agreement that would have imprisoned him for the rest of his life with no eligibility of parole.
It's Daryl. Did we say Darren? It's Daryl Dixon.
Daryl.
Okay, anyways.
Sorry. Since he has credit for time served, he will have the chance to face parole in 26 years. The judge said he granted him parole eligibility because he helped the state's case. He will be required to register as a violent offender and a sex offender if released. And Angela Wagner also took a plea deal. Her plea deal required her to testify against her husband Billy and son George. September 10th, 2021. In Pike County Court, she pled guilty to conspiracy to commit aggravated murder, several counts of aggravated burglary, tampering with evidence, possession of firearms, forgery, obstruction of justice, engaging in a pattern of corrupt activity. She admitted to helping plan the killings of 8 members of the Roden family and the Gilly family, all to secure custody of her granddaughter. She helped forge documents, surveil the victims, and coordinate logistics with her son Billy and sons Jake and George. Angela was sentenced to 30 years in prison with credit for time served. She'll likely remain incarcerated until 2051, and upon release, she'll have to be under adult supervision for 2 to 5 years, and she has to register as a violent offender. During George's trial in October 2022, the court didn't have to prove that he physically murdered anybody. They had to prove that he was involved in some kind of way, whether it was planning, providing anything what was used, or for the cover up. He was adamant that he had no involvement, but there was some speculation. A woman was called to the witness stand, and it was George's ex wife, Tabitha. She and George got married in July of 2012, and they lived in George's parents' home with Billy and Angela. Tabitha says the dynamic of the family was that Angela was in charge, and whatever she said goes. She made rules on what was allowed in her house, even down to what kind of sexual relations they could have in the house.
I was
Angela also had a life insurance policy out on Tabitha. Tabitha wasn't allowed to answer the phone, she wasn't allowed to check the mail, and she was not allowed to go outside by herself. George and Tabitha end up having a son together, but eventually they separated after George got violent and slapped her with a belt after Tabitha and Angela got into an argument. She tried to leave, and George blocked her in the house. In response, she bit him and tried to, quote, rip his penis off. Go
hell
queen.
yeah, girl.
Go queen. After that, she was able to run out of the house. She hid under a truck, afraid that she was going to get shot because Angela had told George that she was going to go inside and get one of their guns and kill Tabitha. George denies that this incident ever happened, though, and they end up coming to a separation agreement. Angela had tricked Tabitha into signing custody papers, though. The custody papers stated that George would have sole custody, and they rarely let Tabitha see her son. The next witness they call is Jake's ex-wife, Elizabeth. He got married to her in 2018 while they lived in Alaska. She grew up Mennonite, so pretty sheltered, I would say. Angela wasn't happy at all that this happened. In a phone call that was recorded, Angela is heard throwing a fit because Jake's daughter is calling Elizabeth mommy, and Angela said that she has been demoted to grandma and how she loves and trusts Elizabeth more than her.
So she wanted to be the little girl's mommy?
Basically. Jake yells at her, saying she is her grandmother and not her mother. In another wiretap, Angela is heard telling Jake that if he takes his daughter and moves her into his and Elizabeth's home, she won't get an ounce of rest because she will be in danger. Jake is heard yelling back at her that she isn't in danger and calls his mom paranoid. Also, I'm trying not to use the daughter's name because I don't feel like outing her. Kind of want to protect her safety. I found it crazy that someone actually, like in an actual article, they were just like, yeah, this is her name. I'm just like, why are we outing this child?
I thought you weren't allowed to if they're under 18.
That's what I was thinking.
I thought, like, articles and stuff, you weren't allowed to talk about them.
Okay. Okay. So during their marriage, Jake demanded that Elizabeth cut contact with her family because she was sexually assaulted in the past by a family member. And he demanded that on their wedding night. He also demanded to know all of Elizabeth's password to her social media and any accounts that she had. When asked to describe the family dynamic, Elizabeth explains that Angela, Jake, and George, as a group, decided what they were doing as a family. They also did everything together, whether it was shopping, going to the park, or just going on a drive for no reason, just to get out of the house. Angela also started making up lies accusing Elizabeth of sexually assaulting Jake's daughter. Angela then got George riled up to the point of him getting on a phone call and yelling at Jake, calling Elizabeth a whore. When Jake questioned Elizabeth about it, he said the best thing she could do was to tell the truth, and if she did it, he would tie her up with a rope in the barn and beat her with a bat until she was dead. Then he would proceed to kill her entire family, and if he didn't do it, then his mother, father, or his brother would. And Elizabeth was terrified that she was going to fucking get killed. George still claims he's innocent, but on one of his credit cards, it showed that he had purchased the cell phone jammer a couple months before the Roden family's murders. George's lawyer claims that Angela was in charge of all the bills and that she also had access to everybody's credit cards, and she also uses George's credit card to purchase the cell phone jammer. Then they called Jake to the stand, and Jake decided he didn't want to be fucking filmed or anything during his testimony. He says that 5 months before the Rodens were killed, his mother got into Hannah Mae Roden's Facebook account and seen the messages saying that she would not sign custody over to Jake or the Wagners and that they would have to kill her. So naturally, His father came up with the idea that they were just gonna have to kill Hannah, and because her father and other family members would act in retaliation, they would also have to be killed, as well as anybody who was present in the home. So on the night of the murders, Jake, George, and Billy, all three were in Billy's vehicle on the way over to the rodents. Billy pulled over to the side of the road and said that this is their last chance to back out. Jake told his father they had no choice, that they had to commit to murdering the entire rodent family. The first house they went to was Chris Sr.'s. Billy knocked on the door, and when Chris answered it, George was supposed to shoot Chris with the SKS rifle. He froze, so instead, Jake took the rifle away from George and shot Chris Sr. Billy then stormed in, fired shots at Chris Sr. and Gary Roden, and he killed them both. He came out of the house and he broke down crying in disbelief and was just repeating that he just killed his best friend. They then went back into the house and dragged Chris Sr. and Gary's body back to Chris's bedroom. At Frankie's house, Jake went into Frankie's bedroom and shot him, and when Hannah Gilly moved slightly, he reached over and shot her too, while their 6-month-old was in between them. When they got to Dana's house, she was shot first in her bedroom by Jake. Jake then went to Hannah's room, and she was actively breastfeeding her new baby at the time. So he shot her, but he rolled her over so the baby could still breastfeed because he supposedly was concerned that the child would have starved to death because he wasn't sure how long it'd take for their bodies to be discovered. So then Jake went to Chris Jr.'s room, the 16-year-old, and shot him. If that wasn't enough, Angela was called to testify against George in exchange for a plea deal of 30 years. Just like Jake, she opted out of being recorded during her testimony. Angela says that Billy, Jake, and George were the ones who planned the murders. She says that she had a conversation with George asking if he was sure he wanted to go through with this, and he said yes. On the night of the murders, she texted the boys' phones to make it sound like they were at home and then went to bed. So she knows that her sons and her husband are out going to kill these 8 people, and she's like, "I'm gonna go to bed now." She says the motive wasn't about custody, but it was about protecting Jake and Hannah's daughter. She says that her and Jake were worried about what was happening to her, and that she says that her and Jake were worried about what was happening to her when she wasn't in their care, alleging that she was either being sexually assaulted or about to be sexually assaulted, even though there was no evidence of this happening or that there was a plan for this to happen to her. But this is something Angela has a history of doing. Every time Jake or George had a girlfriend, she accused the girlfriend of sexually assaulting their children. She uses it as a manipulation tool to scare them into listening to her and doing what they ask. She accused Hannah's family of doing it. Then, when she was killed, she accused Elizabeth of doing it. She's very possessive of her grandchildren, and she often threatened to take her son's children away from them if she didn't like what they were doing or they just weren't doing what she wanted them to. November 16th, George is called to take the stand by his defense attorney. George describes his mother as over-opinionated, thinks she's better than everyone else, and manipulative. He says they got into arguments constantly, and the reason why he didn't move out was because he was afraid of being broke with no roof over his head. They show a photo of his wedding where his wife Tabitha is on one side of him and there's a man on the other side, and he's kind of draping his arms over, like in a hugging fashion, over both their shoulders, and he's asked who the man on his left is, and it was his best friend Frankie Roden at his fucking wedding before he killed him. He's asked if he participated in the murder and he replies no. He's asked if he knew his brother and dad were planning these murders, and he says no. He says he didn't even know they left the house that night. He really tries to kind of separate himself from the rest of the family, but that's hard for him to sell because they quite literally were connected in every way down to their financing and their houses. On November 30th, 2022, the jury reaches a verdict in 7 hours. George is found guilty for aggravated murder on 8 counts and conspiracy, and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Rita Newcombs, which is Angela's mother, was sentenced to 5 years to adult supervision after pleading guilty to obstructing the investigation of the Roden family murders. In exchange, prosecutors dropped the forgery and obstruction of justice charges along with the perjury charges against her, and Rita agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. She had to pay a $750 fine and could serve 83 days in jail if she breaks the rules outlined by the court. Billy's mother had charges dropped against her because they found a bulletproof vest in her house, but this bitch actually bought it off of Amazon after the murders happened to protect herself because she was scared.
Fair enough.
So I'm just like, 74-year-old woman is ordering a bulletproof vest off Amazon. As of now, Billy Wagner does not have a publicly confirmed trial date because his original trial date was set for January 6th of this year, 2025, but it was postponed due to a successful motion for a change of venue. The defense argued that the pretrial publicity of the murders would make it impossible for it to not have an impact on that jury. The court had been weighing options for relocating the trial, and there's been pushback from the Roden family, what's left of them, because the family wants it to stay local. And there's actually a law called Marcy's Law, and it protects their right to participate meaningfully in the process since their families were victims. So the trial is still expected to happen of this year, but there's like no confirmed date or location.
That's crazy that like almost a decade later and he still hasn't been tried.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's also crazy that this even happened. All of this for custody of a child.
That now has no parents.
His mother is such a piece of shit.
Yeah, it sounds like
She apparently, the mother was sexually assaulted when she was younger. And one of the family members of the Wagners, they were kind of interviewed in the documentary, and they're like, do you think she was just kind of like projecting that this was happening? Or like, what do you think was happening? Because obviously she's close to them. And she's like, no, I think she was just using it to manipulate people.
yeah, like you can have I understand when bad stuff happens and trauma happens to you when you're younger, but you don't get to go throughout life and then cause trauma to other people. Like
Yeah.
you got to face your own problems.
I guess one of the people who was related to George's ex-wife, I think it was like his ex-sister-in-law, she was sexually assaulted when she was a kid, and this like pushed her to like get help. And I'm like, I'm really happy about that. But like, oh my God. So many people like surrounding this case were like sexually assaulted as kids.
When I
It's
seen
fucked up.
when I seen the four people, the Wagner family,
Mhm.
it explains.
Yeah.
They look like the kind that would
And apparently, Angela married Billy for the money because he came from a rich family. She's everyone literally one of Billy's fucking relatives was like, there is no way she got with Billy other than his money. It's just like, oh my God.
You're telling me it wasn't for either of his chins?
Yeah. It's not because his size 11 feet.
You know what they say.
Oh my God.
Thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook at Paranoia Pair Pod. And we will see you next Friday.
Stay spooky.
Bye.
Bye.